So I'm going to talk about a strange concept, which is an imbalance. And I'm going to use the words imbalance specifically, and my role today is to just lay the table so that for the rest of the speakers, because I'm not an industrial psychologist. There's a lot of them around that's very clever, people in the creative space. So I'm just going to stick with this as a microbiologist, because I was trained as a microbiologist, and I was trained as a food scientist, and then Salva would know for many years I was involved in environmental health. So I'm in this interesting position of having been on both sides of the, of the river, which kind of, and I think that is, Salva, where the whole human component started. Because in environmental health, and we're so glad that they are there today, because that was for me, the child that's always been there and not included. And I think for now, we really want to change that. So, have you seen this movie? I don't know if you've seen this, Murder on the Oriental Express. Have you seen the movie? Who hasn't seen the movie? Okay, for those that hasn't seen the movie, will you just cover your ears? Because I'm giving away the bottom line now. Somebody said that the other day. Please don't tell us what happened. In this movie, there's a guy with the name Hercule Poirot, and he's this investigator. And he's a very meticulous and a precise person. Everything is for him either squared or in boxes or proverbial black and white. He would always pass people and he would set their ties straight and say, this is the way that we do things. You either do it the right way or you do it the wrong way. So much so that in this movie actually measures his boiled eggs in the morning to make sure that they're the same size. Otherwise you don't eat them. So he sends this boy back to get, so meticulous is he. And then as the story goes, he investigates a murder on a train, and then later he realizes that the murder was committed, but there was reasons for the murder to be committed in a strange way. There was atrocities that happened. And when the train got stuck then somewhere between Turkey and somewhere in Asia, and then when he got going again and he had to hand over the perpetrator, the guilty party, he didn't do so. And then he actually lied and he said the murderer got away in the snow, which was totally against his nature. So then the movie ends more or less at the end with this quote. You've seen it, Ben. It says that this guy says, and I'm not going to read everything, or maybe just quickly, my very existence depends on this hope, order and methods. Everything depends on order, methods, process, system. Right or wrong, that's the only way it is. Our little gray cells as a metaphor for your mind. And then he goes and says, now this time I actually have to listen to my heart. The heart, which is the metaphor for intuition, for compassion, for the human side of it. And he has to live with this imbalance. He saw it as an imbalance. And this is why I've coined this presentation. Today we're talking about a supposedly imbalance, because us as food safety, as microbiologists or food safety people, or professionals that love this science, for us it's like only this way or no way. So I thought, let me start with this as a backdrop. Now, the imbalance has been reiterated in our field by lots of publications in literature, specifically by Frank Janas. You know him, he's the head QC manager of food safety at Walmart. Until recently, he's been, Linda, if I've got it correctly, he's been now promoted to a high position in the FDA. I don't think it's a secret. And he said this in his book, that ensuring food safety beyond regulatory aspects, not instead of, beyond, requires a better understanding of the human dimensions. Now, if somebody that's in charge of food safety at Walmart, that's got thousands of outlets worldwide, if somebody like that says this, it must have some kind of weighting, and he's going to talk to us about why he said this. We're going to listen to a presentation from him. And he said that those constructs depend on things like communications, knowing your goals, expectations, education, and so forth. So he said how to get to this human dimension. So why? Because you'll probably say, but you know what? For us, it's about survival. It's difficult economic times. We need to make money. We need to pay salaries, and you'll be right. So what would the implication of this be? Well, if any of you may have missed the last 2 years in the history of South Africa, you would know why we mean that it actually literally costs lives. But I think sometimes the question is also asked about livelihoods, meaning a metaphor for the financial aspect. How does this, sometimes often top management relates to, how does this relate to rands and cents in my pocket? And I'm going to try and show you that. So if you've had a look at recently at some of the, and this is, you don't have to try and read, it just shows that it's actually increasing. The frequency of reports in the media about food safety incidences are actually increasing. For whatever reason, maybe the reporting is just better, but the frequency is increasing. So if you don't believe this, that there's issues that can relate to money for your company, actually, and funds, I had a discussion with a friend of mine, good friend Janusz Luterek, which is a well-known, probably the most well-known food safety lawyer in the country. And I said to him, can you please tell me, basically, if you've got a company, a food safety company, in layman's terms that I can also understand it, what is the process that happens according to the Consumer Protection Act? And this is, well, it works like that. There's about 2 scenarios. There's a scenario where somebody gets sick and then they report you and say, you know what, I ate something from your outlet, so I'm probably sick. But you don't have proof of that. It's that scenario. So there's an alleged cause, and then they call it a balance of probabilities, meaning now you have to have an investigation or a discussion into what was the probability that my outlet could have caused this incident. And then it goes to comparative liability to say, okay, are you liable? And in this, there's a lot of factors that feed into this. SOP compliance, which in some of the cases we know about this was fine. And then all the other softer issues, things like leadership, things like the way that, are you compassionate about your consumers, about your people, about your workers? And all of this feeds into your liability. Because sometimes people have asked me, but you know, how can the soft issues, like how do you treat your people? How do you, are you compassionate or are you arrogant? How does that relate into a legal aspect? And Janusz explained this to me yesterday. This is, of course, the other one. If there's an alleged cause and there's proven, if it's proven, then you're liable. And we know about some of the cases recently where it was proven and the liability was beyond doubt. So in this case, of course, what you would want to do is to never get into a proven liability case, because, I mean, then you'll have to, then liability is already proven, and then there's damages to be paid. So the point that we're making is that it's not only about process, it's about people, and otherwise the chain breaks. So we're going to have a little bit of a discussion further about why is it important that your people are motivated. And very simply, it's because every person, doesn't matter on which level, whether they're shop floor, whether they are mid-level management or top management, they all have senses, they all do stuff that can go beyond only the minimum thing that they've been appointed for, their minimum KPA. And this is what you want to tap into. Somebody picking up something, somebody smelling something, somebody hearing something that may be wrong, something broken, something spilled, something spoiled, and go the extra mile to clean it up. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but our company is fine. The food safety sector is fine. We look after our people. We've got a good culture. So why talk to us about this? So I'm going to show you 2 slides, and I want you to try and pick up the difference. Will you do that for me? So let's try this. So this is a slide from a typical, food processing environment. There's chickens there. There's battery chickens. Poor chickens standing there hour after hour doing the same thing, hour in and day out. This is unhuman. Do you agree? So see if you can see the difference between this slide and the next slide. It's the same thing. living organisms, living people, standing for hour after hour after hour after hour doing exactly the same thing. You know what's the difference between the two, ironically? The first picture's got an ethical audit covering them. The second one doesn't. So how interesting is it that, God forbid, that we don't look after the case of the first slide. These guys can just go on with the same. So that's the point that we're trying to make. So let's talk about Sam. And Sam can be any person of any race, of any gender, doesn't matter. Let's say, just for argument's sake, Sam has been busy with this activity that she's got there for 3 or 4 years, or 5 years, how long she's been working for this company. She works in shifts, and she does the same thing hour after hour after hour after hour. Now, you will agree with me that as she's standing there, she probably thinks about the asset plan, right? Okay, FSCC, ISO. No, she's not. She's thinking about probably when the next break is going to be, whether the taxi will be on time today because she needs to go home and feed her kids, and all the other stuff that she needs to do. And the irony is, about what I've learned about humans, is if you attend to those priorities, she will also be motivated in the workplace. So the argument here is that, let's say there's a food safety incident, for argument's sake, that happens in this scenario. A food safety incident that is not covered by a process or a system. She starts packing up and there's a piece of very sharp glass lying in the mixing bowl. She's on her way now to the taxi, needs to get off her clothes, gets on, going to the canteen quickly, do the stuff, puts her stuff away, and then run to the taxi maybe, or whatever transport she uses. And she sees that piece of glass lying there. Nobody will know whether she picked it up or not. Nobody will follow it up. It's not in a KPA. Nobody would come down on her. What would be the constructs that will make her pick up that glass or leave it there? And I think that is the point we're trying to make, because some of the incidences that we had this year on food safety is probably because, no, not probably, is definitely because there was a food irregularity, or a non-conformance is the way that bad word, I hate it. Non-conformance happened, and the non-conformance was not picked up by the process or the system, because the companies that were in trouble had all the processes and the systems. So how interesting is that you can have all the processes and systems and still not perform? So somewhere there's something beyond, and it's the beyond that we want to try and put out there. So this relates to what we've just said in terms of somebody saying, it's not my job, I just want to go home. Or somebody that says, do you know the story about JFK and the janitor? JFK, there's a true story about JFK that went to a space in the 60s. He went for a visit to probably Kennedy Space Center, and there was a janitor cleaning the floor, or a cleaner, said to be the janitor. And JFK asked him, what are you doing? And he said, I'm sending the first person to the moon. Because he would understood his place and his importance in that entire enterprise. Now, I wonder if you go to your firm, your company where you work, and you ask a cleaner what you're doing, whether they will say, we are putting good quality, safe food on our consumers' plates. Is that what they say? Is that what Sam would be saying if you ask her? Well, that depends on constructs that we'll have to talk to about today. So when we come to the actual how, because Linda always says, it's nice if we talk about these things, but what about the how? So let's go further a little bit. I'm just mindful of the time. Let's go further a little bit and talk about how do we get this culture? Because you're going to say, now, okay, we buy into this. You say a few things that make sense. How do we get there? Now, and this is where our colleagues that works in the social sciences, Ben and Salva and Esther, will give us inputs on what makes people tick. But this is very simply a few of the things that drives behavior. Need drives behavior. If you're hungry, you'll eat. Eat is a behavior. Emotion drives behavior. If you've seen a teenager in love, you'll know that, what that means. Emotion drives behavior. So there's many aspects that drives behavior. But not all of these aspects are manageable because it's inherent traits of individuals. But it's been, and yesterday I got confirmation from Esther with this, that in surveys done, the two most important aspects relating to behavior in the workplace is leadership and culture. Leadership and culture. And that you can change, that you can influence. And we're going to talk about this aspect here because it's not always easy to change leadership. Just look at what our politics and you'll know how difficult it is to change leadership. But culture you can change, you can work on. And that is why we are here in a food safety culture workshop, because we believe, Lynn and I and our team here believe that if you can change the culture, we will improve our food safety compliance and performance. I don't want to use the word compliance, performance. So this is a slide. There will be a test afterwards. And you'll have to, no, I'm joking. It just shows you how many theories there are. There's even more than this, theories there are of behavioral change. There are many. I don't want to go into that. I'm a microbiologist, food scientist. I just know there's many things that drives people. Some like their jobs, some like salaries, some like other stuff. You can read it up. We want to talk about culture, but this is what bothers me. Of all those processes we just talked about that can change behavior, which one have we used in the food industry? Only monitoring and consequence. If you don't do this, this will be the consequence. That's the only one. If you didn't, and we even used words such as non-conformance. You're not conforming. How bad are you? You're not conforming. And there will be an implication. You're not conforming, and the implication will be probably related to you as an individual or to your section or whatever. So this is what we've used, which is actually a very bad behavioral change mechanism. I had a headmaster at school. I come there from Bethlehem in the Eastern Free State. His name was Professor Lou Odendaal. Mr. Lou Odendaal. He looked like Hitler. He had big hands, and we were so afraid of him. Because if we stepped left or right, he would come down on us. What did we do when he wasn't there? When he wasn't looking? When we were at home? Then we would say, now we'll show him. Because he's not here. So monitoring and punitive action or consequence is a very poor behavioral trait mechanism, and it's got a bad impact on culture as well. And this is what we've been using all along. So and this is, my colleagues, Esther from Industrial will laugh at this because it's an old piece of, literature. Herzberg, Motivate and Hygiene. This was done in the 70s, I think, if I remember correctly. But I just wanted to show here, already, 50 years ago, they said this is the factors affecting job attributes that negatively and positively. So can you read that? What is the biggest demotivating factor in a company? Policies and administration. So we really come to as quality managers and say, I really look so much forward to updating my HACCP plan today. I really look so much forward to, just checking if this person really cleaned where he should have cleaned. This guy says differently. He says that it's a demotivator. There's another one, relationship with your supervisor. Also quite important there. And then if you look at the things that motivate people, it's actually different things. And remember Sam, achievement, recognition, those human traits that we often so much tend to forget in business. So just a brief slide here that says something about the systems that we've used and what we should actually have done. The purpose of audit should be to perform it, not to point fingers. It should assess systems, not people, and that's not the case. Currently, there's always a relationship or a relating to a non-conformist to an individual. You didn't clean, you didn't sign off, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And then people disengage. And we see it at universities often. Also, Ben, about some of our colleagues, you've heard it from a colleague that says, you know what, I'm not going to be involved or do anything extra, I'm just going to do my work. I'm going to sit in my office, do my work, go home at 5, come at 8. Because I just get so much, problems if I do this or that. So then you disengage, and that's what you don't want. So I'm going to have just look at the time. Then it's very strict. So I'm going to talk quickly about just these 3, not that one as much, because to be honest, there's not really a lot we can do about this apart from just trying to teach them and trying to talk to them. And we've had situations, colleagues, and we know about that we really just can't get the leadership of the organization to talk to us even. They don't want to talk. We've talked to QC managers saying, you know what, my boss won't come. He'll just say, you do it. It's your responsibility. You do it. They don't even want to engage us on this. So I was talking about, thinking about the 3 traits just very briefly, and maybe this is for another discussion, about the traits that the leader should have. Ethos meaning ethical leadership, logical leadership, and this one is the one that we don't see. Empathy, emotion, humility. Very briefly about culture, and I'm only going to talk about the issue of trust because culture is such a wide aspect. But I think trust is probably the biggest foundation of that. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit quickly. I want to talk about knowledge very briefly, and then about contentment, which is actually job satisfaction and happiness, and how that relates to performance. So I want to say something about culture very quickly because that's why we're here. There has been there's a lot of literature. This is the definition that Janas uses in his book that says food safety culture is the attitudes, values, norms, and beliefs and behaviors that a particular group of people share with respect to food risk and safety. Very nice in a nutshell. I like, my colleague said, there's another word called, new word now in literature called organizational citizenship behavior. It's a nice term. And communities of practice, you'll talk about that a little bit later. But just this is the way that we do things around here. This is the way that we do things around here. In our environment, we do it like this. And we've got such a nice word in South Africa for this. People exist because of people. Ubuntu. And we have already this trait in our country that we must just start practicing in our businesses. So very quick about the trust issue. And in an organization, you start always here, the lowest level, which means I work and you pay me. That's it. I go home. I don't want to know anything of you when 5 o'clock is here. And then you've got the needs-based level, which implies that I actually start realizing that you've been standing for 5 hours on end cutting this. Don't you want a break? You probably, or do you want some water or whatever? And also towards your employer, you know what? You actually want me to perform because then we all gain from this. The needs knowledge. Relationship-based, where you actually go to and say to somebody, walk down the processing line or corridor and says, your child yesterday played sports. How did they do? Did they win? You mentioned something. Somebody was sick in your family. How was that? How was that? You didn't feel good. How often does this happen that the CEO walks and just, come and says to a person on the shop floor, tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing. How was your day? Often it doesn't. I was standing a while ago. I'm at university. I work at a university. And I was going at the Dean of Research, because we've got the biggest research group at the university in food safety, one of the biggest in the country. And I said to him, we've had the center for 2 years. You've never come to our center. You don't know what we're busy with. You've never visited us, talked to the students. There's 94 of them, masters and doctorates. How are you? Do you have a bursary? Where are you from? What project do you work on? You just manage paper and system. It's all that you manage. And then you've got trust. Only after you've gone through this way. Meaning, I can trust my employer, he will look after my interest. And I can trust my worker to go the extra mile. It's as simple as that. So trust is a very strong denominator in getting culture, because I think mostly because we accept challenges more if we trust. It's like this this coach of a football team, and this little player at school trusts this coach. So the coach says to him, go with that ball. And then he says, you know what, I'm going to just run. I'm going to, get this try. When you trust, you are prone to taking challenges, you're loyal, and it's based on certain aspects. And again, it's the issue of the human side. Now, without calling, any names or if you look at, honestly, if you look at the arrogance and of some of our leadership in the food sector, what it says about that institutional culture, it says a lot about that. Because if this is the approach of the CEO, if this is the approach of leadership, how does he relate to his people and to his consumers? So I'm almost finished, Lynn. I think I've got 2 or 3, 4 minutes left. So I've got an issue a little bit that I've showed this slide often with just training for the sake of training. And we see this a lot with the CETAs, where there's lots of money lying around. If you're just clever, you can get money from a CETA. You must get some kind of course together. You make a lot of money and you buy your German car. But you see what happens here. This guy completed his course. Obviously, he's got the knowledge, but it didn't change his behavior. So the knowledge he's got is still the same person. And it's simply because there's a knowledge to behavior value chain that we often miss. So can I ask you sometimes that if you look at training and skills development next time, make sure that the trainer provider pays some attention to these aspects as well. You don't only go, there's chalk and talk, what we call, and then you just write the test, you get the certificate, but there's no behavioral change afterwards. And there's a way to get this. Knowledge must go into skills, then to values and attitudes, and then only does it change behavior. And there's ways to do this. So this is my, I think, second slide, last slide. So this is, for me, such a nice slide because it shows a very important, this was taken from a Bike SA book. And it's two guys, riding on a bike, obviously at very high speed. So this guy, he's just good. He likes it. This guy is scared to death. But the message here is that in exactly the same situation, you can get two totally different risk perceptions and risk attitudes. It's exactly the same situation, do you agree? Same speed, same bike, same everything. But this guy, look at him, he's scared to death. This guy. So you'll have exactly the same situation, let's say in a processing plant. We're back with Sam and the glass, the piece of glass or something rotten. And some person will not see it as a risk, others may. And that is influenced by lots of parameters. And knowledge is a very important aspect of that. Do I actually know that glass can cause a risk? Or I really just don't know. So there's lots of aspects that influence our risk perception. But the point that I want to make is, you see how different people react in the same environment. So this boils into the factor of, are you happy at the place you work? Because the general consensus is, if you're happy, if you're content, you'll perform. It's as simple as that. I wanted to say something about our situation in South Africa, which I think sometimes we forget about. And I think this was also a fundamental mistake that we've made in some of our food safety incidences, because we had a Eurocentric approach to some of our problems. South Africa is different than many other countries. You would know most other countries, all African countries, we're unique. And that is the reason why we've got challenges here that is unique to our country that relates to food safety. I just want to use 2 examples. You can get this, read up on it. I just want to talk about traditional foods. In the traditional narrative, according to traditional beliefs, and we had a discussion at the last conference, Linda, food safety conference that we had here at St. George's Hotel, and you've got, for example, in the Eastern Cape and in KZN, if there's a funeral, there's certain beliefs that goes with the funeral. You must slaughter the ox or the cow or the cattle in a certain way, because it's part of your tradition, you would know. The whole tradition is the same, it needs to be done because that's the belief. And it comes with his whole set of other, just ask Salva, he will tell you how big an issue it was for legislation and for the environmental health fraternity to control ritual slaughterings, because it's ritual. I mean, that's something that we need to work with and that we need to control in our country. And we cannot just say you can't do it. That's not how our country works. We need to be able to manage it. We've got feeding schemes, the National Schools Nutrition Program, where we feed millions of kids every day. There's issue with regard to procurement and tendering processes and quality to feed these kids. And it's a vulnerable group. It's something that we've got unique with us. We've got labor issues in our country. How do labor issues impact on food safety? Linda can tell you, she was busy with the masters at a big entertainment facility, and one day there was a strike. There were 14 restaurants there. There was a strike one day. So all the food workers, they stood outside and they were for good reason maybe, they were toy-toying, they were demonstrating. But they had to continue. So there was casual workers standing on the side looking for what we call peace job. And they said, you know what, we need to run. Just you come in, you guys come in meanwhile. We'll give you a half an hour. We'll just show you how to chop quickly. We'll just show you, here's an apron for you. So can you imagine? So that is how a labor matter can feed into the safety of your food on your plate. So we need to, at some stage, confront how we're unique. So to take home, I'm summarizing, and I think this is just the point that I wanted to make and get across, to say thank you for being here. We really appreciate it, and we know that your money is good invested, but your time is worth a lot. So it is beyond matters. The whole idea of beyond only system and process matters. We've seen that lots of incidences where there was outbreaks while there was compliance. So what lies beyond? It's not only about the hard sciences, about all my microbiology colleagues at the universities being very clever and talking about the shelf life of Listeria monocytogenes at this and this temperature, which is fine. Those things are all very important. But at some stage, we must also understand that it's also about the softer issues. The knowledge, the people versus process, there's people behind all of our processes, the knowledge into behaviors, and not just safety programs, but also food safety cultures. We really believe that if you look at, it will be difficult to measure, because this is a leap of faith that you take, just to ensure that you can show a balance of probabilities. So hopefully you'll take this at heart, and if there's a balance of probabilities and your food safety culture is in place, probably you won't be liable. So I think this is the point that we want to make. But it's not just about liability and about issues. It's about being humane, being passionate about what we do, and being a humble leader. Okay, so that's my contribution. Thank you, Lina. Thank you for listening.